The Acheron River was more than simply a source of water. It was the very energy that kept the Argent Valley alive. Over the course of millennia, its silver ribbon had sliced through the Earth's old granite, providing support for both ecosystems and human settlements. The stillness was the first thing that Anya Petrova, a ranger, experienced when she arrived to the Whispering Gorge viewpoint on the morning of July 12, 2025, while the mist was still there. Neither the roar of rapids nor the gurgling of currents could be heard. There is nothing except quiet. And below, where a river ought to have been churning, is a vision of desolation, a stark, mud-cracked scar twisting across the valley. Studded with gasping fish and stranded waterweed, this was a shocking sight. The Acheron, a river that had a flow rate of 500 cubic meters per second, had mysteriously disappeared during the course of the single night. The news quickly spread like wildfire, generating intrigue and horror all throughout the world. Ben Carter, a cynical but brilliant field technician, who trusted his instruments more than people. Dr. Lila Chen, a brilliant seismologist with a penchant for the anomalous. Dr. Eris Thorne, a microbiologist who had seen things in deep caves that defied textbooks. And Dr. Elias Vance, a stoic geohydrologist who was known for cracking impossible cases, were the members of the rapid response team formed by Dr. Elias Vance, a geohydrologist who was known for cracking cases that appeared to be impossible to solve. Their first hypotheses were textbook: a large collapse under the Earth's surface, or a recently opened karst sinkhole that allowed water to flow from the riverbed. Nevertheless, the evidence was unsettling. No collapse. Seismic monitoring detected just a single peculiar tremor at 3:17 a.m. It was a low-frequency pulse that was more vibration than quake, and it originated under the riverbed rather than alongside it. It was determined that there was no sinkhole by using ground-penetrating radar and drones. The bedrock floor was found to be intact, although bone-dry. To put it another way, it seemed as if the water had been drawn down through a solid stone. The drilling process then began. Piezometers, which are probes meant to sample groundwater, were successfully sunk. Instead of discovering wet sediment or a concealed aquifer, the cores were discovered to be packed with something else, a gelatinous material that was black like obsidian and veined with faint pulsing threads of electric blue. It had a chilly feel to the touch, an unsettlingly thick texture, and it seemed to take in light. Thorne's initial joy eventually turned into apprehension. It is not organic, ... I am unable to identify any organic matrix found in it, but there is something that makes it ... alive. At the microscopic level, low-level electromagnetic emissions and intricate fractal patterns are seen. When they attempted to take deeper core samples, the true horror started to set in. The drill bit encountered resistance at a distance of 50 meters, and then it screamed as it broke off completely. When they were able to retrieve the twisted piece, they discovered that it was not only coated in the dark gel, but also bonded with weird silvery strands that were thinner than spider silk, yet were very strong. Exotic alloys and crystalline. Structures that have never been seen before in the history of science were discovered via chemical research. These formations exhibited superconducting qualities at temperatures that were considered to be normal. While Carter was keeping an eye on the residual electromagnetic field, he became aware of a pattern. The light blue veins that were present in the black gel cores were not random. Rather, they were moving, aligning, and building complicated geometric lattice that were constantly changing. These lattice seemed to react to the motions of the crew as well as the emissions from the equipment. This was not only residue, rather it was a network of sensors. He said, "It's watching us," with his customary cynicism replaced with a feeling of unbridled horror. Vance gave the go-ahead for a dangerous step, which was a micro-camera probe that would be sent down one of the deeper boreholes. This decision was driven by a combination of scientific zeal and rising fear. Their perception of the world was completely destroyed by the information that it communicated back to them only a few seconds before the broadcast turned into static. Rather of showing rock strata or tunnels, the camera displayed an underground environment that was hard to recognize. The black gel was not only a coating, rather it was a matrix, providing a base that was alive and breathing. There were enormous rib-like structures made of the same silvery alloy that were embedded inside it. These structures were curved like the skeleton of some buried leviathan. They stretched down into depths that were incomprehensible. These ribs were surrounded by large, slow-moving rivers that were not made of water, but rather of the black gel itself, and they flowed with a specific purpose. In addition, there were networks of those magnificent blue veins that were pulsating with energy that was restrained, and they were strung throughout everything like a large and light neurological system. A part of the bedrock wall that was rippling was the most horrific sight that was shown at the end. There was no rock in it at all. It had a thick, armored carapace that was segmented and old, and it was covered with geometric patterns that were difficult to see with the naked eye. The sign was a complicated, three-dimensional fractal knot that seemed to twist the very light that was around it. It was carved into the carapace, and it was visible in veins that were softly lighting blue. Immediately, Chen recognized it, and her face was completely bloodless. That pattern. It is very similar to the energy signature of the earthquake that caused the river to be emptied. There is no geological activity involved. As a signal, it is an indication of digestion. The ramifications were frightening and beyond the cosmos. It was a shell that served as the bedrock, the valley. And maybe the whole continental shelf was not sitting on rock that was inactive. The latent carapace of something that was enormous and incomprehensibly old was where it was resting. There was no draining of the river. Rather, it was consumed. The organism had not stopped functioning. Rather, it had momentarily become active. The river was its siphoned food that was pulled straight through the stone into the gel matrix below, and the tremor was its metabolic pulse. The sensor veins, the response patterns, and the purposeful signal all indicated that it was aware of everything. It was not a pointless exercise in geology. The creature was a sentient being that was on a planetary size and was sleeping under their feet. It had the ability to consume whole rivers with the same ease that a person could drink water. That was just the beginning. The investigation revealed structures that extended to depths that were inconceivable. And Acheron was little more than a nibble. What was more profound? After it had fully awakened, what transpired? The researchers did not let forth a yell.
Ow.
Standing in the buzzing quiet of their improvised laboratory, they were surrounded by cores of live black gel and snapped superalloy filaments. They were looking at the frozen picture of the fractal knot that was shown on the screen that was packed with static electricity. The understanding of their utter insignificance was the source of the anxiety. It was not only the unknown that caused the fear. A geological abnormality had not been discovered by them. They had discovered the secret inhabitant of the earth, a deity that was sleeping under the crust. And the disappearance of the river was nothing more than the fluttering of an eyelid before a possibly catastrophic awakening about to take place. They produced a report that was substantially censored and categorized as classified information exceeding top secret. In official statements, the Acheron's demise was described as an unprecedented karst drainage event. A covert watch was established by Vance, Chen, Thorne, and Carter, but it was not formally recognized. Seismic pulses, tiny variations in gravitational fields, and the chillingly slow and purposeful movement of blue. Fractal patterns deep inside their gel samples are all things that they keep an eye on. They don't get a lot of sleep. They listen to the quiet of the valley. Silence that now seems less like absence and more like the held breath of something old, immense, and terrifyingly alive. They listened to the silence to experience the valley. No, the river did not disappear. It simply said it was the very first taste. And on the back of a sleeping giant with an immeasurable hunger, the world above seems to be resting, ignorant of its existence. The world continued to progress. The disappearance of the Acheron River was referred to as a geological anomaly by the government, which implies that it was a peculiar underground draining occurrence that will never be completely understood. The Argent Valley was designated as a no-go zone. Its surviving water supplies were rerouted, and the few inhabitants who remained were transferred with considerable compensation from the government, which was provided in a curiously short amount of time. As a result of the dissolution of the scientific team, their results were buried behind many layers of official silence. However, Dr. Elias Vance continued to gaze at the scene. In the 6 months that followed the disappearance, Vance was sent a parcel that did not have a return address. On the inside was a hard drive, a collection of vials that were not labeled and contained a distinct black gel and a solitary note that read, "It is becoming more widespread. You must locate me before they do." It was Lila Chen's handwriting that was used. In a covert operation, Vance revived the crew. Ever the paranoid tech guru, Ban Carter had already been keeping an eye out for something peculiar. Tiny irregularities in the seismic activity experienced all across the world. Deep, repetitive pulses similar to a heartbeat, rather than earthquakes to be precise. Moreover, they were gaining even more power. The black gel was being investigated in private laboratories by Thorne, who had gone underground in order to conduct his research. His discoveries were really disturbing. Not only was the material alive, but it was beginning to change. Water caused it to multiply, resulting in the formation of complex fractal formations that were identical to the symbols that were seen on the carapace that was located underneath the valley. Even more concerning was the fact that it was communicating by sending out low-frequency vibrations that resonated with the crust of the earth. Over an encrypted chat, Thorne hushed. "It's not just under the Acheron," according to the conversation. In deep-core samples taken from Chile, Siberia, and the Mariana Trench, I discovered signs of the same substance. This thing, it can be found anywhere. Another instance of disappearance, the disappearance of yet another river, occurred. On March 3rd, 2026. When it happened this time, it was the holy Himalayan river known as the Kali Gandaki in Nepal, which is older than human civilization. It was the same pattern. There were no earthquakes, there were no sinkholes, and there was nothing but a dry riverbed by daybreak, as if the water had dried up completely. On the other hand, there were witnesses this time. The previous evening, a group of monks who lived close to Mustang reported seeing blue light submerged under the river. According to what they said, the water seemed to be folding in on itself, as if it were being drawn downward by an unseen force. Another monk by the name of Tenzin said that he's seen something more, which he described as a large, moving pattern in the exposed riverbed that glowed for a brief while before disappearing. The symbol of the fractal. The protocol for an awakening and further communication was delivered by Chen, who had been conducting an investigation in secret. This time, it included coordinates. She was emaciated, had not had enough sleep, and was surrounded by charts that were covered with red marks. When Vance and Carter found her in a secluded research bunker in Mongolia, she said it's not all that random. The rivers that it is taking are nodes in the network. There are points of confluence. It is the Acheron, the Kali Gandaki, and the Congo, the Amazon, and the Mississippi will come up next, before that. It's a similarity to something else. She brought up a holographic projection. Hi! Which was a map of the whole world with luminous lines linking the rivers that had disappeared. There were certain spots under the crust of the earth where the lines converged, forming a gigantic web that was intertwined with one another. He responded, "It's not just drinking." And he was right. It's preparing. What is the call? The last part arrived at that point. While Thorne was examining the dark gel with the most intense magnification, he made a discovery that contradicted all of the known biological or physical principles. The information was being processed by it. At a size that was beyond the imagination of humans, the fractal veins were functioning in a manner similar to that of cerebral circuits. Moreover, it was transmitting a signal. It is not into the ground, outwardly directed. The truth is, as the truth dawned on the group, they huddled around in quiet. This wasn't simply any monster that had been buried. It was quite a machine. A planetary-scale structure, which may have been constructed by alien beings, that has been dormant under the crust for millennia. And at this moment, after millennia of dormancy, it was rousing itself, eating rivers not for the purpose of nourishment, but for the purpose of energy. When it had reached its limit, indeed it would send out. With regard to what, who, or to whom. A barely audible mumble could be heard coming from Vance as he gazed at the squad. "We're not standing on the earth, we're standing on an antenna." The only thing that provided illumination inside the Mongolian bunker was the flickering holographic map. Chen ran his fingers down the shimmering web of rivers that had disappeared, including Acheron and Kali Gandaki, as well as the anticipated next targets. "A Congo, both Mississippi and Amazon," Vance murmured. "We have no choice but to assume that it is accelerating." It was the first river in months, and now it's the second river in weeks. In what amount of time will it take one each day? How about an hour? The seismic data was retrieved by Carter as he was crouched over his laptop. Rivers are not the only issue. Take a look. He superimposed another image, which included deep-sea trenches, subsurface aquifers, and even magma chambers from volcanic eruptions. They all pulsated with the same vibrations that were rhythmic. The world as a whole was vibrating with energy. The unexpected recoil that Thorne experienced occurred as he was inspecting the dark gel with a handheld microscope. It is the reaction. The material had started to move, and it was beginning to create tiny strands that were a reflection of the fractal symbol that was found on the carapace. After that, a low-frequency, subsonic hum that is resonating across the floor of the bunker. It was a hologram that sparkled. In their respective containers, the gel samples shook violently. Chen's eyes became more wide. It is not just a matter of transmitting a signal. Receiving one is the case. The occurrence in the Congo River vanished 3 days after it had been reported. Once again, the whole globe took note. At the same time that the water was draining into the earth like a bathtub that had been unplugged, satellite feeds indicated that it was receding in a beautiful geometric spiral. A blue light was seen under the surface, according to fishermen who were fishing along the banks only minutes before the impact. Then there was complete quiet. However, the true horror did not occur until after the event. There was a large shimmering symbol that was exposed in the riverbed. It was a fractal design that was kilometers broad and pulsed like a heartbeat. There is the same symbol as previously, except that this time it was not diminishing. It went on expanding. The code of the black. Once they were back inside the bunker, the squad worked very hard. Carter was able to monitor electromagnetic abnormalities by hacking into military satellites of the United States. A pattern that seemed to be nearly identical to was what Thorne had identified as a recurring sequence in the vibrations of the gel. Language. Vance exhaled deeply. It was not a random occurrence. It was a message that was sent. Every decryption method that Chen could uncover was applied to the sequences that she was working with. None of it. After that, she decided to turn the sensations into music on a whim. As soon as the sound started playing, the lights in the bunker began to flash. A dramatic reaction was shown by the samples of black gel, which stretched toward the speakers like vines reaching for more sunshine. After that, there is a voice, a human being, the very least organic. A synthetic, fractal whisper that is stacked over itself several times in an endless loop. Get the gate cleaned up. The Leviathan that is sleeping, the crew looked at each other in a horrified manner. However, this was not only a machine. It was a warning light. And something, or someone, had just responded to the question. While Vance was pulling up the hologram once again, his hands began to shake. There was a pattern to the network of rivers. It turned out to be a circuit, a system that facilitates the transmission of energy in order to magnify a signal throughout the whole Earth. The system was currently in the process of starting up, with 3 nodes having been enabled. Chen said we were wrong as he did so. It's not an antenna, they said. She zoomed the hologram out until the whole planet was visible, filled with luminous lines that crisscrossed the surface of the planet. She went beyond the rivers and the continents. It's on the lock. Something was twisting the key, and it was moving. It is going to continue.